Hi, and welcome back to my channel. In today's video, you have my week 3 Goodreads update. It is the last update while voting is still ongoing. I have to say, I did not get as many books read as I optimistically thought that I would. I've been making really good progress, and I actually am going to pause for just a moment to count up the number of books and get some more statistics before I get into the books themselves. Okay, so I did the statistics, and of the total books for this challenge, and for me that does include not prequels, but since the sequels were on the list, the books leading up to the sequels, I read 2 middle grades and children's prior to the start. I read 7 young adult fantasy books prior to the start, and I read 2 adult fantasy books prior to the start. I'm really not sure why I thought I could get through the adult fantasy list within the time frame, but throughout the time of the 19 days since the nominees were revealed, I have read 12 middle grades and children's books, which do include 2 prequels in the, not prequels, but 2 books in the Keeper of the Lost Cities series. I still have plenty to go before I get to Stellar Loon. I have read 5 in the young adult category, which does include 1 prequel, and I have read 10 in the adult fantasy category, which does include 3 what I'm calling prequels, because the sequels are on the list. 2 of those were for the Scholomance series, and 1 was for the N.K. Jemisin series. Speaking of that, I am not going to read The World We Make until I get the audio, because Robin Miles' narration is hands down the way to go with reading these books. So all told, in 19 days, I read 27 books. That's no small feat there. I will definitely take that. All told remaining, I have quite a few. All told remaining, I have 26, which is 1 less than I read in these 3 weeks. So I've got to get a move on, but I think I will be able to manage it before the end of the year. And it'll be interesting to see how many that I have read by the time that the finalists are announced. Now, I have changed up my display to better fit what I'm going to do in the end for when the finalists are revealed, because I would love to have a display that I can display my actual rankings and not just them sorted randomly, so I can compare to the list that Goodreads puts out with the number of votes published. So I'm going to go in age group order. I'm going to start with middle grades and children. And you will see here that there was an upset. I actually went through and looked at how I had actually rated them, and I realized that I rated New From Here 5 stars and Amari a very high 4.5 stars. So Amari got dethroned, but it was very close because these are both absolutely spectacular books that I highly enjoyed, but New From Here just is amazing, and I really want to get a physical copy of this. I also want to get a physical copy of Amari and the Great Game. Then the next new book that we have on here is Zachary Ying and the Dragon Emperor. I thought that Xiranjie Zhao did a fantastic job with subverting the typical mythology trope that a lot of these books have been doing in the style of Percy Jackson, by making it so that Zachary actually has to figure out what is good, what is bad, and can I actually trust these people? I thought that was really well done. Now, I can't remember if I talked about Arashad and the Nectar of Immortality in week 2, but I really enjoyed this. I thought it was a fantastic conclusion to the series, and I'm so glad that I already read the previous 4 books for last year, because the 4th book was on the list last year. The next new book that I have in here is Ravenfall. I thought it was a decent outing for what it was supposed to be, but there really wasn't a lot of character development, and I would have preferred more from the female perspective than the male perspective in here. So it's middle of the road for what I have read thus far. And then the final new book that's on this list is towards the bottom, second to last of the ones that I have read thus far, and that is The Rise for the School of Good and Evil. I talked about this. I thought it was oddly paced, and I think I did myself a disservice not having read the main series, but I made that decision and I stuck with it. So there we have my most significant change being the a new number one. And unfortunately, it's not one that I can vote for because it didn't make it into the second round, which I'm not happy about. Next, we have young adult fantasy and science fiction. Not much, actually, nothing has changed on the top row. The thing that became difficult was deciding where I would put Cytonic and A Magic Steeped in Poison. I started filling this out and thinking, which one do I like better? And I couldn't decide. I'm like, okay, I'm going to go look at Call-Pile. And I went and I looked at Call-Pile. They had the exact same rating. Okay, well, this is a little annoying. Let me look at enjoyment. I rated them both the same for enjoyment. So I had to make the decision, and because I have invested more in the series, the Skyward series, Cytonic beat out Magic Steeped in Poison, but they are basically tied for me. The new book on here, besides A Magic Steeped in Poison, is Foul Lady Fortune. I read this just yesterday at the time of filming, and this really surprised me. I really didn't have interest in the previous duology. I don't remember the name of it, but it was the Romeo and Juliet retelling. And a lot of people say that you probably should read the duology before, but you can read it without the duology. And I fully agree that you can read it without having read the duology, and I don't think it's going to be a problem. Obviously, things are mentioned. This is a follow-up to the previous duology. I believe this one is also going to be a duology. There are things in this book that might spoil the previous duology, but if you know the story of Romeo and Juliet, certain things that people might consider a spoiler are revealed in here, but if you know the story, it's not that much of a stretch. I really enjoy this. I enjoy this a lot more than I thought I would. Belladonna is ranked towards the bottom, but not because it is bad. There's actually a big gap between my enjoyment of Belladonna and Hotel Magnifique and Violet Made of Thorns. Those two are at the bottom, and they probably will stay at the bottom. Belladonna had a lot of promise, and I talked about in the reading blog where I read this, that there were just a few things that I wish had been smoothed out or changed a little bit, such as the reveal regarding a certain character, but I did enjoy it, and I'll definitely be holding on to the book. Hotel Magnifique and Violet Made of Thorns, I did not hold on to those. So that's my change thus far. And then we come to the adult fantasy. In this one, I have read a lot of these books for this series. The only problem was I had to catch up on a couple of the series, the Scholomance and the N.K. Jemisin book. So I'm going to talk about that one. I'm going to talk about the N.K. Jemisin book, even though I haven't ranked it yet, because I did just read The City We Became. I think I am going to wholeheartedly enjoy all N.K. Jemisin books. I need to get all of them, and I need to read them ASAP, because the way that N.K. Jemisin was able to get into her characters' heads and portray different things, like how she portrayed Long Island in this book, absolutely brilliant. I wholeheartedly like this. And the only reason that I didn't go straight into The World We Make and have it read by the time of this update is because I want to read it via audio. Because the way that Robin Miles, as I mentioned just a little bit before, the way that she embodies all of these characters, hands down the best. Never encountered a better narrator. And the book that'll stay at the bottom, just primarily because it's not the book for me, is The Book Eaters. It's horror, and there were a few things about characterization and plot that I couldn't give it the benefit of the doubt. And I'm really sorry about the lighting. I've been trying to keep the lighting good, but it's washing me out a little bit. So maybe I'll fix that in editing. But The Book Eaters is probably going to stay towards the bottom. The Daughter of the Moon Goddess is also probably going to stay towards the bottom, not because I didn't necessarily enjoy it, but there were problems with pacing, and it felt really YA, and things were solved way too quickly. Now, Electra. The reason that this is so low is not because the book is bad. The book is really well written, but the myth that Jennifer Saint is retelling in this book is so dark. It's so dark, it's so violent, it's almost hopeless for most of the time. And when you're working with that sort of material, it's not my favorite. And enjoyment level, put it down a little bit. Those are, unfortunately, the only new adult fantasy that I read this week, the standout was the one that's not on this list, The City We Became. There's probably not going to be all that much of a difference in the vote when I go to make that vote in just a moment. I'm actually going to finish off this video with showing a little clip of me going in and voting. The plan going forward, I'm going to make a reaction video to the finalists. That's going to be a short video going up the Saturday after you see this. Then I'm going to continue to read as much as I possibly can, and I am going to have my 4th weekly update next Sunday. That's going to be after everything is done and revealed, but in that I'm going to include every book that I have read up until the release of the nominees and including a couple days after. The last update that I'm going to make on this project is when I have finally read all of the books and I can make a comparison for the full ranking list for myself and the full ranking list for Goodreads. So there's going to be 2 more updates coming. One is going to be a weekly and one is probably going to come towards the end of December so that I can read the rest of these books. Now, without further ado, here is my voting. Okay, so here we go. We are voting in the final round. Now, I'm not going to vote in obviously any of these. I do plan to tackle a bunch of books that I'm interested in, and I probably will in a few months have a video about books from other categories that I've read afterwards. So I'm going to go first to the one that I didn't read a lot in, but I really loved one of these books. And I have a feeling none of these would have beat it out. But of these that are in the top 5, the one that absolutely deserves to win, and I really, really, really hope that it does, is All My Rage by Sapa Tahir. It's a National Book Award winner. So there you go. I voted in that one. I don't think that I will read any other books in this list except perhaps The Final Gambit to finish that series. Now I'm going to go in age order, and I'm going to start with middle grades and children's. And as I mentioned earlier, the one that I am super disappointed didn't make it is Small Town Pride. Really bummed that these made it. Kind of bummed that these made it. And this was my worst. I haven't rated it yet, but it's probably going to be a 2-star read. So I really enjoyed everything here on this top row. But obviously, out of all of these, the one that's the best is Amari and the Great Game. So once again, Amari gets my vote. Now we're going to go to young adult fantasy. Okay, so I believe, I'm trying to think. So The Dragon's Promise was my number 2. That didn't make it. So clearly, what am I going to vote for? I mean, this was really good, but I, hands down, absolutely adore Bloodmarked, and I cannot wait for my special editions. So I'm going to vote for that one. Last category, of course, 2 of the ones that I'm not going to read that should not be in this category, that are not good, they're here. I'm not going to vote for those. I might have voted for Nettle and Bone if it had come up. Obviously, it hasn't. The one that I'm bummed that I have not gotten to, and I'm not really sure why I didn't get to it, is Babel. So if that wins, that'd be fantastic. The Lost Metal is amazing, but I'm not actually going to vote for it, just like in the opening round. And so here you go. None of my votes have changed. I'm voting for Legends and Lattes because that's my number 2, and it was pretty much perfect. So there's all of my votes. Thanks so much for watching. I hope to see you in the next one.